Here we go again. Never know when it's on. What's up, everybody? Man, it has been a while. Still been fishing. Just had to kind of collect my thoughts after leaving home. Like the month of August, I went home to fish and spend time with my family. And it was like right after my son had left, but it was pretty cool. And it was just different. You know, I had fished there before, been fishing my entire life. But what I tell people is I only started paying attention about 3 years ago. And it was mainly because, I went back home. My brother and my dad, still stayed fishing and everything like that. And then kind of just brought me and Gabe into the fold. Gabe caught his first bass there. Gabe doesn't really smile much, but man, if you see the smile on his face, man, it's I think I have a picture of it. I'll probably post it after this, but it was just pure joy. So after that, my brother was determined to get us a fish. It was literally the last second of the last day, and man, he wasn't gonna stop until Gabe got something, and it was tight. And they caught it on a chatterbait, and typically for us, like the first thing that we catch the fish on, it's kind of sentimental for us, so we don't use it again. So Gabe has a chatterbait that my brother Kenny gave him, and I have this crankbait. I caught a bluegill. I don't know if it was a fluke, if I snagged him or whatever. Either way, it broke the streak because me and Gabe had gone fishing several times out here. Didn't really know what we were doing and just wasn't catching shit, not even a bite. We went from that to essentially fishing 2 to 3 times a week and not going very many days where we didn't catch anything. Started from the shoreline and went to kayaks, and then most people know I sold everything just to kind of take the next step and get my boat. And it was dope, man. The issue with it was when I got back though was I didn't even want to do anything. I didn't necessarily want to quit fishing or anything like that. I just realized going home and fishing with my dad, because I like fishing alone, or at least that's what I thought till I went home, that it was a huge missing piece. And when I came back, it was that weekend, I didn't feel too good. I had like a fever and stuff like that, which has never stopped me before. And I didn't want to go fish. It was going to be the first weekend, probably 2.5 years, where I wouldn't have went out. But I was convinced otherwise. I still went out with the fever, caught some fish, and grinded it out. But like to me, that was kind of like a Super Bowl, of fishing. Like I get to learn a bunch of stuff they put me on, and then I get to go back and fish with them. I'm not watching them fish. I'm watching what they're doing because I get to see it differently. But we were fishing together, not me fishing behind them or trying to figure it out anymore. I still get snagged all the time and shit. Like I threw I don't know how many baits in the trees and shit that probably weren't anywhere near where I was supposed to be throwing. So that remains the same. But I got back and it was kind of a lackluster thing. Every time I go home, I get a little bit of myself back and a bigger realization that the avatar that I am currently running is simply that. It's an avatar. And I feel like that's when when you kind of start to go insane, when the brainwashing wears off, and you're still in the same matrix, but it's the matrix. It makes things a lot more difficult to get by. But overall, it was a good trip. I'm kind of back on the train. Didn't really know what I was gonna do another video about because I feel like I had like reached the height, and that's usually right around I get to the time where I'm gonna stop doing something. I get to a certain proficiency level, or I believe I'm at that proficiency level, and I stop. And another thing that kind of drove it home was actually Friday of this week. I got to teach class. I get to teach class every so often over there at Tusk MMA, and it's super dope. It's an honor to be there with colleagues. You know what I'm saying? I don't necessarily consider the cat students because everybody's got their niche. A lot of the guys have been in there for a while, and it's dope. But I had a conversation with a dude, and it basically boiled down to, not forgetting the journey. And I felt like at that point I had forgotten the journey, where I went from having one fishing rod to, I probably got like 20 in the boat right now, to the kayak, you know, to the boat, to fishing here, going here, to competing. And it's been a hell of a journey. It's happened fast. And that process has been pretty damn awesome. But other than that, I'm not good. I'm not bad. You know, I'm just here. But today we're going to go over, really briefly, fishing line. And we're going to go over crankbaits, right? So as I said before, the very first thing I caught anything on was a crankbait. And it was a bluegill at home. And then Dave Brook put me on my first California fish with a square bill crankbait on Pine Flat. And, you know, the first fish I caught on my own was on a square bill. And then I went on this tear on crankbaits. And then since then, I've gotten a lot of other techniques, kind of lost the proficiency level with that whole stuff. But this weekend, I actually did pretty damn good on a crankbait. So first thing, we're gonna go over fishing line, right? You're gonna have a couple of different types, and a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but first starting out, you see fishing line, you see a good price, and then you just go get it. You're not really worried too much about the properties, the stretch, the diameter, or even the pound test. Realistically, for me, it was 12-pound test everything, because that's what I was used to as a kid. It has its applications, but there's other test line, right? So first thing I'm gonna talk about, fluorocarbon. Okay, so why would you want to put fluorocarbon? So fluorocarbon is probably one of the more prominent lines other than braid right now, and you can pretty much do just about everything with the fluorocarbon, really without an issue. A lot of people put braid on stuff like top waters and stuff. We'll get into that like in a different video. I'm not a huge top water guy, but I'm a huge braid guy. So fluorocarbon, right? So what I have right here, it's probably all backwards, but it's Yozeri hybrid. And this is, to me, the best kind of bang for your buck if you're starting out, before you get into like the Seagar, Red Labels, and Tatsus, and all the stuff that costs $20 a spool, right? Typically, you'll get this for like $8.99, Dick's Sporting Goods, Walmart has it from time to time. And this is fluorocarbon, but it's a hybrid, okay? And what that means is it has the fluorocarbon property, but it's also nylon, right? So it's a bit stiffer than your average 100% fluorocarbon, but it still has the same properties, right? So your diameter is going to be about the same as it would be for normal fluorocarbon, just maybe off just a little bit, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But it has the same sinking properties. Now, why would you use fluorocarbon? Fluorocarbon sinks. And it does stretch, but it doesn't stretch as much as monofilament, which we'll go over for applications of monofilament in a minute. But the Yozeri hybrid, so if I had the same stuff in Seagar 100%, or even the Yozeri 100% fluorocarbon, the diameter is usually like a 0.011 or 0.010. And I'll get into that more, like maybe in more advanced videos and stuff like that, but this is the stuff you got to watch out. So fluorocarbon, what are you going to use it for? Pretty much every single thing that you run, except for something that needs to stay on the surface. And then you're going to have certain things, and I'm not sure if I have it in here. I think I do. You'll have monofilament, right? So monofilament, it's a bit thicker. It stretches a lot, okay? And it has a floating property, and this is fluorocarbon, you can't, the fish can't really see it too well in the water, but mono, they really can't see it in the water. But it has a floating property, it's a thicker diameter, and it has a ton of stretch, right? So typically, you're going to use this for certain applications, which I'll kind of get into, but I'm going to keep it revolved around crankbaits for now, because there's certain styles that people will use and techniques in crankbaits, but I'll give you a very basic one that works, and then some of the more intricate stuff that maybe some of the pros use, maybe some of the guys around here use, or whatever. This one in particular is Suffix Advanced, but this is what's called copolymer, okay? So it's monofilament, but again, it's mixed with a couple of different other things. That's why they call it copolymer. It's quite a bit tougher, stretches a little bit further, and it's a way thicker diameter. And a lot of these are single spooled, so you don't have to worry about the thing. It spools up real nice. But fluorocarbon, and then you're going to have different types of tests, right? You got 10-pound tests, you got 12-pound tests, you got 6, you got 8-pound tests. You got all the way down to 2-pound test if you're running leader like trout stuff or super light, finesse stuff or other types of fish. But you got fluoro, you got mono, and then you got braid, right? Braid obviously is exactly what it sounds like. It's braid. You're gonna have 4x, 8x braid. This is how many strands that they braided up, and that goes into a line. You're gonna have some that's rougher than others. You're gonna have some that's a little bit sleeker than others, and they have their application. But braid is extremely strong. So if you turn around and you get something like a 10-pound braid, which is like 10-pound this, you got it 3 times that, 4 times that. You know, a 10-pound braid is equivalent to what would be 30-pound fluorocarbon or something like that, you know? And obviously don't quote me on that, but it's a lot. And braid has absolutely 0 stretch. And it also floats. And you're going to have different colors and stuff that you'll use or whatever. But the one thing that I didn't know with all these lines is, one, the difference between fluoro, mono, and braid. And then when I stepped it up to the braid game, the first braid I got was 40-pound braid. And the reason I got 40-pound braid, don't make this mistake, is because the diameter was equivalent to 10-pound test, right? That's what I went. I was like, oh, you know, 10-pound test. I use that, throw it on. And 40-pound braid is a bit much for some of the stuff that I was using it for. So you really, you know, you kind of want to step it down a little bit when you go through the braid. 40-pound braid, 50-pound braid, use that for like glide baits, huge swim baits, and like major flipping and pitching if you're gonna throw it into some nasty stuff. Fluorocarbon, pretty abrasion resistant. Mono, not so much. And braid, depending on what you get, not so much. My favorite braid to get, I would say bang for your buck, is a Suffix 832. Daiwa braid is really good too. You're going to have the Suffix Pro Mix. It's the cheaper version, comes in a 150-yard spool. That's going to be your most bang for your buck. And then there's a ton of other braid companies out there that do a lot of the same thing. But yeah, over time, you're going to actually figure out like what you're going to want for line. But fluorocarbon, if you have to pick one, in my opinion, for most applications out here, it's going to be fluorocarbon, right? And for me, a standard is 10 or 12. I'll step it up to 14, 15, 17, depending on what's going on. But that gets into some other stuff. But 10-pound fluorocarbon, I used to rock 12, but 10 and 8 is plenty strong. You just got to check your knot. So first thing I'm going to go into for crankbaits, right? So yesterday, caught about 7 fish. Only a few of them were on worm techniques, right? Because that's what I've been doing a lot lately. Texas rig with either a 1/4 ounce or a 5/16 is kind of like my favorite because I'm impatient. I don't like to wait for the fall. Plus, I feel like you can feel more. And then I went back to drop shotting. Almost exclusively use a 1/4 ounce stick weight. But 3/16 is usually like probably the best fall and bang for your buck, if you will. But most of the damage was done on a crankbait. And you have different types of crankbaits, but the one that I was using primarily was, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a Rapala DT8, okay? And the DT stands for Dive 2. It's just their particular series. You're going to have a bunch of crankbaits out there. Probably one of the most popular and inexpensive ones are going to be your KVDs, which are great crankbaits. And you're going to have certain dives of those crankbaits. So this DT8 is exactly what you think it is. It dives to 8 feet. Now, you're going to have square bills. You're going to have all kinds of other stuff, which we're going to go over here in a second. But this one, you're going to have certain materials. So you're going to have some that are made of what's called balsa wood, some that's going to be plastic, right? Both of them work very, very well. Balsa wood has different properties, different mechanics in the water, really. And these Rapala DT6s, they're not full balsa. I think the site says like 7% balsa wood, but it's in the connection of where the bill is, right? So I had this on a 7.3-1 Kistler Series 2, right? And Kistler Graphite. Now, yeah, I do have a sponsor with these guys, but I'm going to tell you right now, in terms of cranking, this reel, it casts so easily. It's kind of ridiculous. Very little bird's nest. And then the graphite out of a American-made rod. All graphite probably comes from overseas, but the it's so sensitive, right? And then just the casting, the accuracy. This is a 7-foot medium rod. And I try the crankbaits I do go on here. It's rated for a 1/2 ounce. I try to stay in between there and not hit the max on there. But this is what did most of the damage yesterday, and this is what's called a medium diving crankbait. Now, some of the other ones that I tried yesterday, I didn't get any really luck off of, but I still ran them. Is this right here? This is like your standard square bill, and this is actually a KVD blackback chartreuse. Very common color. Takahiro Omori. He uses a Lucky Craft one, but this guy, I watched him shallow crank a lot, and his story is pretty cool from where he came from to what he's doing now in the MLF. Super inspiring. But this is kind of like his thing, and a couple other guys. It's a pretty common color to use. And these are made of actual plastic. Now, this is what you would call a square bill. So, obviously, I don't know if you can get this in camera. The bill is square. So, a lot of your square bills, they'll be listed like a 1.0, a 1.5. They're going to go in a range of 3 to 5 feet. And then you're going to have some, like a 1.5 is basically 3 to 5 feet, but it's a bigger profile, which I'll show you here one in a second. And then you have that medium diver. And if you can tell, like, you'll see the difference in bills, right? Now, you do have a square bill profile that will dive to 8, but typically they're going to be rounded out, and you see the difference in the length of bill. So that's how it kind of like does its thing in the water. And every one of them is going to have a different type of wiggle, right? And certain wiggles are going to be needed for certain things. But either or, most of the damage was done on that DT8. Because I kind of shallow cranked the DT8 because I didn't feel like this was getting to the bottom. So, square bill, you got your medium diver. This is another medium diver, but this is a flat-sided crankbait. So instead of it being like rounded like a fish, it's kind of flat. And you would be oddly surprised at how effective these things are, especially right now. So right now, it's technically the fall transition. A lot of the fish are they're feeding, and they're doing a couple of things. They're either sitting, at least at Kauai, about 20-25 feet of water, or they're pushing shad up into little coves, little pockets, and then they're smacking on them in shallow water. So that's where your squirrel bear will go, or the DT8, especially if they're hiding between rocks, kind of deflect it off of the rocks, and you kind of get it to go. So now setups, right? And after that, I'll show you some of these other things in here, but setups. So like for your square bill, I like to use, obviously, a bait caster. Can put it on a spinning rod. 10-pound test, and I typically don't choose a rod that's over 7 feet. Reason being is because it's really target oriented, right? So yeah, you want bomb cast, you want to throw it past what you're doing, but you're also going to want to have that accuracy if you have a blow up or you need something there. You can still get it far enough out, but it's not ridiculous, right? Now, if I'm going a little bit further down, or maybe even possibly speed cranking, not necessarily with this one, this is a 7.6 cranking rod. So now you're going to be able to bang this out. Still plenty accurate, but the tip allows it, and this is better with your graphite composites, allows it to actually stay in a strike zone longer. So you're not having that constant wavy stuff, you know? And then another setup that I have is this one right here is what you would call a composite, okay? I had fiberglass. I tried the fiberglass route. I really didn't care for it too much right now. So I shelved it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to come back to it at a certain, a different space and time, right? But what a composite is basically it's a mix. So you'll have some that'll be 50-50, 60-40 or whatever, but it's a mix of graphite and it's a mix of glass, fiberglass, right? This one in particular is a Kistler feeling reel. This is a medium heavy, 7 foot, and this is a 50-50 graphite glass mix, right? And the reason why you go composite vice fiberglass, the reason why you go fluoro vice mono is a couple of different reasons, right? So first off, your gear ratio, right? So this one, I crank a little bit faster sometimes, so I'll go with a 7.3 to 1. Typically, you're gonna want to go low 6s with the crankbait for the simple fact that you're gonna need torque, and it keeps it again in the strike zone longer, unless you're speed cranking. You can speed crank with a 7.3, a 7.8, an 8.1 to 1. But typically for me, my style with the medium divers, I'm gonna go 7.3. With my square bills, I'm gonna go 6. And that's gonna be my gear ratio. Depending on how far down I'm going is gonna determine my line size. So the craziest and the key for the guys that have been fishing crankbaits and didn't know this, the bigger line you use kind of affects how deep the actual lure is going to go. So when it says 3 to 5, and say you got a square bill on and you decide to put, 14-pound test, 15-pound test on it, it's going to work, but it might not get to that 5-foot depth. It might get to 4, it might get to 3. You know what I mean? For me, 10 is enough to get maximum depth, even a little bit more depending on your rod. If you have a longer rod, if it's rated for 8, I might be able to get it at 9, you know what I'm saying? Or get it at 7, get it what it is. But that setup between the fluorocarbon and the sinking property is going to help. Now, why I strayed away from the glass for now is because of, I call it haptic feedback. I cannot feel the lure vibrating in the water. I can feel when it hits something, but I can't feel it vibrating. And the reason is because glass is less sensitive. And the reason why people are going to use glass is, one, most of them are moderate or mod fast. And you can cast them forever. But the reason why I went away from it is because it does take the feeling out. And the concept behind that for the guys that are a little more advanced is that it takes a little bit of the feel out so that when the fish gets the lure, you're not yanking it out of their mouth. So reaction time for a fish, I think for them to inhale and spit something out is 1/4 of a second. Reaction time once we feel something is 1/4 of a second, which ends up being, oh, I feel something, woof, and ripping it out of their mouth, right? So that's why a lot of people use glass and they go back to monofilament, which I cranked with monofilament for a while. I'm considering going back because that was my most successful with crankbaits. And I just go a little bit deeper on what I was actually doing in the first place. So the good thing about composite cranking is that you're going to get that feel and sensitivity of the graphite. You're going to get the flexibility and the overall load up of glass, and you take about a little bit of feeling. So you're still getting that haptic feedback. It is going to delay your response a little bit, and it just makes everything better. And you can do this for chatterbaits, all that stuff, right? So I do like graphite composite as of now. But if I had to pick one, it's definitely going to be 100% graphite. And here's my concept with that. If you're getting bit on a crankbait and you're reacting immediately to that and you're pulling it out of their mouth, wait a second. Super easy. Just calm down. You know what I mean? And that's why I feel like graphite is good. It's not one of those things where you're going to see, you see the whole MLF, they're like, ah, you're not doing that with a crankbait. You're letting it load up and you're side sweeping into it till you have a decent resistance, and then you're playing the fish. So just wait a second. It's trebles. Good amount of the time, the trebles are going to get them. Okay. So you got those three types. Yeah, 3 types. Fiberglass, graphite composite. I prefer graphite. Graphite composite is pretty dope right now for me. But glass, not a big fan of at this particular time. I'm pretty sure I'll change my mind and repurpose that rod, because that's just what I do. Is a learning curve, and I like to feel. I have to feel everything. If I can't feel it, I'm annoyed. I don't know that I'm fishing it correctly. So I talked about some of those, and I talked about I'm gonna talk about some other flat-sided crankbaits and a couple of deep diving crankbaits. So right before this, like late summer, or actually beginning of summer when it gets really, really hot, and then like if you're gonna do this during, I would say maybe the winter time or so, these deep cranks are pretty effective. And to me, right now it's fall. They say it's crankbait season. For me, this is another bait that is a year-round bait. You just have to fish it differently. But something like this, you'll see how it's huge, right? And this isn't even as big as they get. This one is a 6XD. That is about 20 feet. Really big, very heavy on the shoulders. So if you're doing this, you got to stay dedicated, and every now and then you gotta put it down. But that's a version of a deep diving crankbait. So you got square bill, you got a medium diver, you're gonna have a flat side, and then you're gonna have. I kind of consider this a different category, even though it is a crankbait. you're gonna have your rattle trap or your lipless, right? So this is just a regular Bill Lewis shiner. And then you're gonna have another category that's, like I said, it could be controversial, but I figured this is a crankbait because you can crank it as such. You can also crank a chatterbait too, but this right here is called a blade bait. And here pretty soon, this is gonna be crazy because you can jig this like a spoon. You can run it through the water column like a lipless. You can let it fall down like a flutter spoon and run it up. There's all kinds of things that you can do with these. But again, you're also gonna have certain weights for a lot of different things. And then you'll have stuff like, where is it? I got a hybrid hunter, man. I got this one because of my dad. He had this thing, it's called a Hellboy. And I was like, man, that looked like one of them hybrid hunters or scroungers. And he was like, it's called a Hellboy. So I looked up Hellboy. They're made by Lucky Strike. But I couldn't find any. So I just grabbed one. And this hybrid hunter. So this is essentially has the similar characteristics to a square bill, but deflecting it off of cover and actually getting it through things is a bit easier, and it tends to ride a little higher in that water column, and it gives it a little bit of a different tilt, right? To me, the key to cranking is speed, time in the strike zone, and location, and deflection. Deflection is huge. You can open water crank, it works, but that deflection for some reason drives fish absolutely insane. So anytime that you can run a crankbait to the proper depth, say you're in the boat and you're at about 14 feet of water, you throw it up on the bank, start with a square bill. If you're not hitting anything, which doesn't mean that you're not going to catch any fish, if you're not hitting anything, go with something that goes a little bit deeper or change your profile, lighter line. But for me, that's why I'll go to a DT6 or a DT8 by Rapala. I'm not getting paid by Rapala. They're just really good crankbaits. Yeah, and then you're just gonna, they say match the hatch, right? So you either match the hatch or you go something completely belligerent, because it makes the fish look at it and be like, oh, what's that? And then they follow it, and then it hits something, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And then they bite it for some reason. I don't know why. But for now, our fish are feeding on shad and these things called smelt. So smelt's a little bit brown, kind of translucent. And when it comes to color, I like to break it down into a couple of different categories. And if I have to only pick two, it's going to be an opaque and a translucent one. And opaque for me, a lot of people are like, oh, it's solid. But opaque has like it's solid, but it can be kind of see-through, but it's more solid than a translucent. And then you're gonna have a solid color, right? And then you're gonna check your water clarity. For me, if the water is bad, like it was at Kauai on Saturday, then I'm gonna start with that black back chartreuse. And then if it's not what I need it to be, I'm gonna go with natural colors. And then if I'm stuck on cranking, I'm gonna go with something ridiculous. So it's either depth, color, or they're just not there. You know what I mean? Or maybe that's not the speed that they want it at. So you gotta either slow it down, maybe you gotta speed it up. Maybe you gotta threaten with something else in the area and then run it back through. But crankbaits, man, that's pretty much what it is, man. So if there is a better time to crank wherever you're at, now is most definitely the time to do so. I love crankbaits. Crankbaits is dope, but it's not for everybody, and it's one of those things where you can't really run it all day. You gotta have something else there, and you definitely should have something else to follow up just in case you get struck. You don't pull them in. You gotta have something immediately there next to go ahead and follow up. But yeah, that's about it, man. Fishing line, crankbaits. I think maybe the next one I'll do like maybe jerk baits or rip baits, man. Because again, rip bait for me that's an all year thing, and I actually prefer to use them when the water gets cold. They work really good in pretty much all year round, but when the water gets cold, that erratic motion of what's going on, and then that stop, if they're gonna get it, that's when they're gonna get it. They're gonna want to smash on it, and it's just fun. Reaction power fishing is fun. But yeah, other than that, that's about it. Maybe I'll go out again tomorrow. I'm trying to get some on the water content. But I don't like having the camera running, you know, while I'm fishing, because it seemed like the fish is like, oh, he's filming. Listen, you know, he's not gonna catch nothing. And that's usually how it ends up. I have a whole bunch of footage with me casting and no catches, so it's pretty fucking annoying. But yeah, man, that's it. Thanks for all the support so far. I know it's been a long time since I ran a video, and what was cool to me was all the people that hit me up. Hey man, when's the next one? I didn't think people was watching like that. So I'll try to be more frequent with it, but for me, it's one of those things where I can't just pop off and do it. It's something that I think about for a while, and I was just kind of in my feels after leaving home, so it took a minute. But yeah, I'll try to do some more, but thanks for that. That little bit of support goes a long way for me. And if there's stuff you want to see or questions that you have, I'm not a pro by any means. I'm learning this just like how most of y'all are learning it. And I like to hear what you guys do too, your techniques, and it's all going to help me. My tournament schedule's been released for next year. So, you know, any little bit of help matters and definitely counts for me. But last thing, man, there's a lot of people that I've been intermittently seeing, and this is not a bash on anybody, because I know people are busy and stuff like that, but you know, oh, how you doing? I've been meaning to come and see you. I appreciate the sentiment, right? But you know, I've just been so busy, and the message I want to give is like, that's dope, man. You know what I'm saying? I start to think one of two things. People just say things because we're human, or I'm the star in my own movie and people don't exist unless I'm there. And I don't think it's the second one. So never in your life get confused with not having time with something not being worth your time, as harsh as that sounds. If people wanted to see you, if people wanted to do this, they're gonna make the time. All right. Doesn't mean that they don't tend to, or they're terrible people or anything like that. It just means that at that particular juncture, that time is not worth being given to you. And if you sit around and you wait for people to give you that stimulation, you begin to not develop your own stimulation, and you remain stuck. Invest in you against all odds. Because at the end of the day, that's all you have. And right now, I'm investing in me. I'm putting faith in me, and I'm on my winning side. And call it selfish, call it whatever you want. But I haven't been able to do it my entire life, because I do things for the greater good of the colony, and things that, you know, I feel are right and supposed to be done. You don't do it for a reward, but it also exhausts a lot of your natural energy that you don't get back. And maybe you feel good about those things, and that's fine. But once you lose the ability to create your own energy, or learn that you don't have it and do nothing about it, that's when the depression sets in. So all the guys that are dealing with it, man, going through it, the anxiety, the depression, I still go through it every day, same day. There's nothing to minimize about yours. Stick it out, keep doing what you're doing, and find your thing, you know. A dream is just a dream unless you do something about it. And I'm tired of just dreaming. And you should be too. It'll get better. And life will go on either way. But it'll get better. But it's only going to get better if you make it better. And you save yourself. Because nobody's coming to save you, man. Nobody. As much as some of us may want to, it's not going to happen. Invest in yourself. Create your own energy. And spend time doing things that you want to do. Because in the end, you know, that's really the only thing that matters. Only thing I want people to remember me for is I went out with a bang. That's it. You tell a story about me, I just went out with a bang. That's all. That's it. Other than that, it is what it is. But if you haven't gotten out there on the water, go on and get out there. Trust me. It's therapeutic. You're going to love it. Until the next one, I'll see you guys.